6 miles to the south of Royal Tunbridge Wells and deep in the Sussex countryside, the Wealden village of Rotherfield sits comfortably in the cold November sunshine. The houses and cottages are typical of this part of the world, and the people who live here are understandably proud of their patch. In the heart of Rotherfield is St Dennis Church, parts of which date back to the 11th century. The yew tree, which stands in the churchyard, is said to be over 1,500 years old. Surrounding hamlets include Mark Cross, Town Row, Mayfield and Argos Hill, with its newly restored windmill to welcome you. The River Rother rises in the cellar of a house in the outskirts of the village. In spite of this unusual and cramped source for a stream, the Rother soon makes its mark on a 30-mile-long journey through the Sussex and Kent countryside and out to the English Channel near Winchelsea. Surprisingly, it's only 47 miles from Rotherfield to Buckingham Palace. Many people make this short, though often frustrating journey each day to the capital to earn their crust, leaving the lucky few to enjoy rural surroundings and a simple lifestyle in the sort of peace and tranquility that everyone dreams of. This countryside is part of the famous Sussex Weald, the belt of high ground between the North and South Downs, which was once dense forest land. Much woodland still exists here, though on a slightly more humble scale. The trees provide logs for cosy fires in the evening and much-needed shelter for the birds and the wildlife at this uncertain time of year. In November, even the greatest optimist has to admit that winter is now well and truly here, with all that entails. If you're lucky, it means frosts, frozen puddles, and beautiful crisp mornings. On the other hand, it can also mean wind, rain, and short grey days. But there's still beauty to be found in the countryside, whatever the weather. And in this part of the world, there are plenty of secret places still to discover. Nelson Russell was born a countryman 88 years ago. He left school at 14 and went to work with his father on a dairy farm. He had to rise at 3:30 each morning and often didn't finish until after dark. 63 years ago, Nelson moved to the farm, which is across the road from where he lives today. Now that his son has taken over, he has time to remember the good old days when tools were handmade and jobs were done by manpower rather than by machine.
I was actually born within the sound of St Peter's Church bells, Tunbridge Wells, at a farm called Bay Hall Farm, 30th of May 1914. I have heard it said that I started the war, but I doubt that myself. The spiles belong to a friend of mine who does a lot of fencing and that sort of thing, and it was his pieces of chestnut. Why the hell he had to pick me out a tough bit, I'll never know, but there you are, he did. This is not an outside toilet. Actually, it's a smokehouse. I've tried to smoke lots of things. I've been very successful with bacon and that sort of stuff. I have done quite a bit of hedge laying, and this is one of my favourite tools. My dad was using it when I went to school at the age of 6. It's got the bevel on one side and we call it a side axe. That was made by Willie Swift of Seal. This one I found underneath where we pulled out a big old ash stub that was about 100 years old, and there you can see all the pits in that. That is made by Elwell, mass produced, but it's still a beautiful bit of steel. Hey, how's your mate? Jimmy and James are friends of mine. They helped me 12 months ago make some cider, and they wanted to make some for themselves. They're pretty good at that sort of stuff. They've got the hang of it now so that I can lean on them to do it okay for themselves. You must have nearly enough there now, Jimmy.
Yeah, got plenty now.
I've got tired of making cider. I usually used to make it in the autumn up till Christmas, then rack it off into woods in February. And in February I got too interested in gardens. I'll do it tomorrow. I'll do it tomorrow. I'll do it tomorrow. And tomorrow got to September. And when I had a look at them, they were all vinegar. I tipped it out on the field. You've never seen so many drunk worms in your life. James has got a daughter, Rachel, and she started to cry, and Jimmy said, "What's the matter with you, Rachel?" She said, "Well, all the children round here have got a granddad. I ain't got a granddad." I said, "Look, Rachel, love, from now on, I am your granddad." And you know what? That's stuck. She has now got a little girl of about 2, and I'm still a granddad, and I'm a granddad to that little kid. I'm a granddad to the whole family. I'm a granddad to Jimmy and Jimmy. That's absolutely beautiful. I'm certain that hot weather we had for a short time has put a lot of flavour into this. This
you're
should
right.
be a good brew, Jim.
Yeah, you're right.
Brian Parks is a third-generation farmer. He's lived at his farm on the outskirts of Rotherfield since he was 3 years old, and he helped his father with the milking from the age of 7. Each day, Brian, and sometimes his grandchildren, Jack and Esther, feed and look after his hens and his animals, realising that in today's tough climate, farming is never going to make them rich. But he's content in the knowledge that he's earning a living and still doing things in the good, old-fashioned way.
We love to have the kids around. They do a bit of feeding the chickens, and when there's any calves in, they do a bit of calf feeding, and like that. We don't let them in with the big cows because it might get mown down or knocked down, one or the other, especially when the bull's in. When I first come to this farm, there was a lot of men working here. And then there was the land girls in the war, and we had 2 thrashing drums running. It was very dusty though, it didn't do your lungs any good, I shouldn't think. It was a slower way of farming than one massive tractor roaring up and down a field. Besides, we had a herd of shorthorn cows, and we had a lot of pigs. And my mother had hundreds of chickens for eggs she used to send to Stonegate. I was born in the parish of Rotherfield and never been anywhere else in my life. About Jarvis Brooks, the farthest I've been away, I think. So. The vintage tractor is a Ferguson 35, Golden Galleon they called them. It's nice sitting there because you're part of the land. You aren't shut in a cab. I mean, when you're in these modern ones, I mean, it's just there. They put nice Q cabs on them to keep them quiet, and then they put a radio in them, don't they? I've had Shire horses since 1971, the centenary of the Shires. Today I'm using Rotherfield Duke, which I bought when he was 3 years old. He'd just been broken to go with the one that I'd already got that matched him, which sadly has passed on since. And they was a very nice plough team, and they used to go together in the wagon. The other one used to be the trace horse in front, and they used to do very well around the shows and look quite smart, even though I say so myself. Rotherfield Duke, he's a bit laid back really, which I don't mind, because getting older now I'm a bit slow. I don't like him chasing about too much.
David Peacock loved drawing so much as a child that he decided to make a career of it. He started developing his gift when he worked as a tea boy in an advertising studio in London. Nowadays he's a sign writer. He illustrates books and makes posters. He always longed to live in the countryside, and 27 years ago set up home in Rotherfield.
I started beekeeping because the garden, I couldn't grow vegetables down there. The slugs and the squirrels and snails were all a problem. And I liked honey, so I went to night classes for beekeeping and had a hive in the garden, and it's grown and grown and grown. I quite enjoy working with the bees, but it is very hard work actually. I enjoy the product at the end of it. I have to replace the old honeycomb, replace a certain amount each year, so the bees have got something to work on and they've got fresh honeycomb to build on. The bees actually build it out to the honeycomb that you would recognise.
It's really amazing they're actually flying in this dreadful weather. They're not bringing in pollen, but they're certainly bringing in something. They're probably going out and getting water to drink.
I have one hive that's done tremendously well in the garden, and it's done well over 200 pounds of honey. But normally the average would be about 30 to 40 pounds of honey per hive.
Ah, good, they're all alive. They're sort of fanning, with they're ventilating the air through. Nice little black bee.
Hi David, how are you?
Fine, thanks, Jackie. It's dreadful weather, isn't it?
Awful, isn't it? I've run out of honey for my porridge.
Would you like runny, hard or soft?
Oh, runny honey, please.
Right, okay. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Enjoy.
Bye.
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 Debra Thompson grew up in an oast house in the village of Hildenborough to the north of Tunbridge Wells. She went to art college in Canterbury and then to Florence, where she did a course in pottery. Later she set up a studio with her husband in Northampton, but always yearned to come back to this part of the world. They saw their chance 7 years ago and moved to Rotherfield. Debra produces pots of all shapes and sizes in her studio at the bottom of the garden, and also runs children's pottery parties, adult workshops, and she teaches pottery at the local after-school club.
I absolutely love working at the wheel. It's very therapeutic. You really are totally absorbed and you have to concentrate very hard to do it. I think think it's just the feel of the clay. It's just such a lovely feel, and it's such a lovely medium because you can mould with it, you can do lots of detail, you can do big wide sweeps with it, and you get all different textures of clay, you get different colours. I think it's just such a versatile medium, really. I get my inspiration from the country, just looking at the trees, just the way that rocks weather. Recently I've started to make sculptures to go outside. I think having done sculpture at college, it's quite nice to now use the pottery and to go back to sculpture too, and to combine the two. The sawdust firing is a great technique because you never quite know what marks are going to come out on it. It's lovely random effects of smoky black marks, which are caused by the sawdust actually around the bowl. That's set fire to, and as it smoulders against the pot, you'll get these black burnt marks against it. I love sawdust firing. It's lovely to see it just go whoosh, and you know that something really exciting is happening to your pot inside the dustbin. You can put the pot in and you really just have to hope that the marks are just going to do something for the pot and emphasise the shape. Sometimes it does, sometimes it doesn't. We have an after-school pottery club at Rotherfield School. It's just for an hour. It's for the junior age children, and we do all different projects. Today we're making Christmas puddings with a lid that you can lift off, and we make little Christmas decorations to go inside it. It's always amazing to see what children can make. I think if they can have a lot of encouragement and they can gain confidence, then they'll achieve amazing things. Oh, look at these. Look at that. Those bits are brilliant. It's great, isn't it?
You'd be mistaken if you thought that the only proper places to make wine were in the Chardonnay region of France or under the never-ending sun in South Africa. For here, in East Sussex, Will Davenport has 4 acres of vines, and just over the border, in Horsmondon, another 8 acres, growing the famous Pinot Noir grapes. His career began when he started taking holiday jobs at vineyards in Alsace and California. Then, after 2 years working in the wine trade in London, he went to Australia to learn the necessary skills. Today, at his winery, with the help of John Murison and Marcus Goodwin, he produces 10,000 bottles of his own wine each year, and much more as well, from grapes sent him by other growers in the region.
Right, so this is pruning, and
Yeah.
it happens about this time of year, normally slightly later, and what they're doing is they're cutting all of this year's growth off.
How far
which is,
down? Show me.
Well, this is this year's growth, which is
Yeah.
grown this year, and they cut it down to about 2 buds. So you can see there's 2 little buds
I
in
see.
there, and they pull the cane out. You have to be careful for your eyes. We've just finished picking grapes. Picking the grapes is the busiest time of the year, and we quite often work 20 hours or more in a day, 7 days a week, and so we normally have a bit of a lull now and a few weeks off. Right, this is where we keep the tanks fermenting, and I'll just quickly go around and taste them, smell them and then taste them to make sure that they're okay. And,
Oh, it's quite sweet and nice.
yes, slight grape juice still, really. Yeah, fizzy grape juice. Delicious.
Excellent. I'll have some of that. Thank you very much.
After the sparkling wine's been aged for 2 years, we have to disgorge it, and this is a process of getting rid of the yeast sediment out of the bottle because it's been fermented in the bottle that it's going to be sold in. And so it's riddled, which is a process of shaking the bottle so the sediment ends up by the cork. And you then remove the cork and let the sediment out, and then put your champagne cork in, and a wire cage on the top, and foil it, label it, and it's finished. And some wines have a slight sweetening syrup put in them at the same time to balance out the acidity in the wine. I think English wine is never going to be big business because the climate here makes it very difficult for people to make serious profits. So we're always going to be aiming for very high quality and producing quite small volumes. I think over the 10 years I've been in the business, I've seen more members of the public discovering English wine and finding out that they actually do like it. Jill, this is a wine that I'd like you to try. It's our sparkling wine, 1998 harvest. And,
what a lovely colour. Isn't it a nice colour? Shall I try?
Yeah, please do.
That is lovely. That is really lovely. It's fruity as well, isn't it?
It's not like a champagne, it's an
That's
English
gorgeous.
wine.
Despite the onset of winter, Rotherfield remains a cheerful village, enjoying all the traditional customs and celebrations. On November the 5th, the Rotherfield and Mark Cross Bonfire Society likes nothing better than to entertain and delight the villagers with a procession followed by a bonfire and fireworks. The unknown author of this well-known poem can never have imagined how long his words would be remembered down the centuries. Remember, remember the 5th of November, gunpowder, treason and plot. I see no reason why gunpowder treason should ever be forgot. A stick and a stake for George's sake, so please remember the bonfire. 50 barrels lay below to blow old England's overthrow with a dark lantern and a lighted match. That's the way old Guy was catch. Holler, boys, holler, make the bells ring. Holler, boys, holler, God save the King.